This is a video that I have been dreading. A video I have been desperately trying to avoid, delaying, hoping that it wouldn't be necessary. I've done everything within my power to somehow swerve the conversation that is Kai Havertz. But circumstances have dictated we can swerve it no more. So this is a video about Kai Havertz and his contribution to Arsenal Football Club. To do this conversation justice, I think we have to go back in time. We have to go back in time to Kai Havertz at Chelsea. And his time at Chelsea, overall, wasn't a particularly happy one. He was a perennial square peg in a round hole. An obviously talented footballer, but a footballer without a position. Not a striker, not a winger, not a midfielder, not an attacking midfielder. There wasn't really an obvious position for Kai Havertz to find at Chelsea Football Club. You know, if I was to pick a five-a-side team of Premier League footballers, there is a chance that Kai Havertz would be in it. But at Chelsea, I often wouldn't have him in our 11-a-side team. He was a playground player, so good at certain things, but lacking in so many of the things that are so necessary to be a well-equipped Premier League footballer. And initially at Arsenal, I feel like it felt the same. Arteta struggled with where best to deploy Kai Havertz. You know, he used him mostly in midfield where he was ineffective, and there were no open play goals from Kai Havertz until the 25th of November. At various points, it was comical. Do you remember when Arsenal's players generously, almost charitably, gave him a penalty in order to get him off the mark? You know, people were regularly pontificating about his struggles, and as regularly as mid-February of this year, there was some conversation around whether Kai Havertz would be an Arsenal player this time next year. You know, whilst he scored in the Champions League final, in the Club World Cup final, in the Premier League at Chelsea, he often felt like he was on the periphery of games. You know, it was immensely frustrating. As a fan of Kai Havertz, as a fan of the club that he's representing, you know how talented he is, you know what he's capable of, and yet he does it so infrequently. The technical ability of Kai Havertz was never up for debate, but his desire, his passion, his suitability to the Premier League, in my opinion at least, was most certainly up for debate. You know, perhaps signing at the same time as another expensive and underperforming German sharpened the focus on his inability to live up to that £70 million price tag. You know, Timo Werner was rubbish. Timo Werner is rubbish. If I was to do my all-time 11 of worst ever Chelsea players, Timo Werner is a starter. And Timo Werner missing sitter after sitter certainly didn't help Kai Havertz. But even away from the contribution of Timo Werner, Kai Havertz's inability to impose himself on games was so frustrating. You know, for the majority of his time in England, including the first half of the season at Arsenal, he didn't score anywhere near enough goals to be playing as a centre-forward, despite quite often playing there. He wasn't providing enough. There weren't enough assists if he was starting as a number 10, and he could not impose himself on games enough to play as a central midfielder. He was prone to petulance, and he could be bullied out of games. Despite being a big man with a bit of a snide side, he felt so lightweight. Easily shrugged off the ball, bullied out of games by centre-halves. It was so annoying. He's actually the archetypal, can he do it on a wet Tuesday night in Stoke sort of player. At Chelsea, he was a player who would do well in fits and starts. He'd drift in and out of games, and he'd drift in and out of form over the course of the season. 5 goals in 1 month and then not scoring at all the next. A scorer of great goals, but not a great goal scorer. If you watch his highlights on YouTube at Chelsea, you will think he's one of our greatest ever players. But it is so misleading. But something has changed. It's painful how this has gone. To watch him develop and contribute to Arsenal the way that he is now hurts my soul. And I now have no option but to utter the most horrific words in the English language. If Arsenal win the Premier League, Kai Havertz will be a huge reason as to why they win it. In other words, Chelsea and Chelsea's transfer strategy will have allowed Arsenal to win the league. We will have facilitated Arsenal winning the league. We have gifted Arsenal a solution to one of the problems that Mikel Arteta faced. Fantastic. Because I have no choice but to admit this, Kai Havertz, for the last couple of months, has been simply hard to even say it. He's been sensational. He's barely put a foot wrong, scoring massive goals when they most need them, turning draws into victories. That is the very definition of being a champion. Turning draws, credible draws quite often, into victories. 1 into 3. That is the difference. And Kai Havertz is the difference maker. And Kai Havertz here obviously deserves a lot of credit, but I think the full credit needs to go to Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta saw something in Kai Havertz that I don't think many people saw. And the way that Mikel Arteta has deployed Kai Havertz in that false 9 position has had a direct impact on the the title race. Let's analyse the last 11 games that Kai Havertz has played for Arsenal. Bearing in mind that this is the business end of the season. This is when champions become champions. This is when the cream rises to the top. This is the moment. If there's ever a time in a season to be dazzling, it is now. If there's ever a time in a season to turn it on, it is March. If there's ever a moment to make sure that your team secure the 3 points, it's in the crescendo of the season. And Kai Havertz is most certainly being that. In Arsenal's last 11 games, he has scored 8 and assisted 5. In 11 games, he has scored 8 and assisted 5. Bearing in mind, these 11 games at this stage of the season are worth their weight in gold. The title is going to go down to the very wire because of the contribution of Kai Havertz. In this calendar year in the Premier League, Arsenal have played 17 games. They have won 15 of those. One of the games that they didn't win was a very credible away draw at the Etihad. So only on one occasion has it slipped for Arsenal. That was the game against Aston Villa. In every other game, this entire calendar year, they have been perfect. That form that we've just demonstrated from Arsenal, that form that is truly dazzling from Arsenal, coincides perfectly with Kai Havertz finding form. The link between Kai Havertz being brilliant and Arsenal being impenetrable are totally linked. In the Venn diagram of Arsenal being dazzling and Kai Havertz being astonishingly good, the grey area is there for all to see. Basically, Arsenal have shone as Kai Havertz has burned brightest. He has developed an understanding with Bukayo Saka and Leandro Trossard that we could only dream of at Chelsea. We tried him at Chelsea with so many players in those positions and the harmony was never there. The telepathy was never there. Look at the relationship now that he has with Bukayo Saka and Leandro Trossard. It is intuitive brilliance. The upturn in form from Havertz has meant that he's gone from a 1 in 5 kind of guy at Chelsea to a 1 in 3 kind of guy at Arsenal. Agony. At Chelsea, the one thing that you couldn't argue against was his knack of scoring massive goals. You know, we win the Champions League, he's on the score sheet. We win the Club World Cup, he's on the score sheet. You cannot argue with his ability of finding the back of the net when it most matters. But his form of scoring big goals has continued. He scored 2 goals against us, his former club, and then he bangs one in against Tottenham in the North London derby. Look, by no understanding was he an unpopular player during his time at Chelsea. But I would also say that there weren't many Chelsea fans that were sad to see him go. Like, he was never a favourite of the many that used to go and see him play week in, week out at Stamford Bridge. But at Arsenal, he seems more popular. Now, I think that's partly because Arsenal were desperate for him to succeed. They really want to get one over on Chelsea because they have been lurking in our shadow for the past 2 decades. Come on, I've got to get that in, haven't I? Come on, do me a favour. This isn't fun for me. Let me have that at least. But their personality, Arsenal fans' personality in Kai Havertz, it feels a better fit. He feels more like an Arsenal player. And I don't mean that as a compliment. But there are still doubts about Kai Havertz. He's yet to do it over a full season. And his domestic form in Europe hasn't been replicated in Europe. He scored 1 in 10 for Arsenal. What I will concede, however, is this. If he can continue this form over the last few weeks of the season and win Arsenal their first title for 2 decades, it will prove a shrewd bit of business. Arteta, yet again, will have got it right, and Kai Havertz will have proved a lot of us wrong. However, until then, I think the jury's still just about out. A lot of Arsenal fans are still telling me that they need to sign a top-tier striker in order to compete on multiple fronts. Therefore, Kai Havertz can't be the solution, even if he goes some way to solving the problem. They're my thoughts on the matter. I haven't enjoyed this at all. I've tried to be as fair as possible. Please let me know in the comments, do you agree with the points I've raised in this video? If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like. Please click subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next video. Cheers.